Well, darling, you do look stunning. You look divine, darling.
Oh, Ethel, what is all this?
And during that time, I consider the years I spent on I Love Lucy to be perhaps the biggest rip-off of my career.
When most people think of classic television, their minds go straight to I Love Lucy. It was the show that changed everything, bringing comedy into millions of homes during the 1950s. Lucille Ball became a legend, Desi Arnaz built a television empire, and together they created moments that would live forever in pop culture. But behind the laughs, behind the Candy Factory scenes and the Vitamin Vegamin commercial, there was another story playing out. A story full of pain, secrets, and struggles that the audience never saw. This is the story of Vivian Vance, the woman who played Ethel Mertz, Lucy's best friend and sidekick. For decades, a rumor spread that Vivian had signed a contract that forced her to gain weight so Lucy would look thinner by comparison. People believed it as if it were gospel, but the truth is, that contract never existed. Lucille Ball once made a joke about it at a party, and somehow the world ran with it. Vivian had to live with that false rumor her whole career. In reality, her life was shaped by things far darker and more painful than a Hollywood myth. To understand Vivian Vance, we have to go all the way back to her beginning. Vivian Roberta Jones was born on July 26, 1909, in the small town of Cherryvale, Kansas. She was the second of 6 children, and from the moment she was old enough to talk, she loved entertaining. But her home life was not a place where laughter was welcomed. Her family followed strict Methodist rules, and her mother believed that acting, performing, or even singing for fun was wicked. She warned Vivian that if she pursued that life, it would lead her straight to hell. Imagine being a child with this natural spark for performance, only to be told that your dream is a sin. That was Vivian's world. She felt like an outsider in her own home. Every time she tried to show her personality, her mother shut it down. That constant battle between her desire to shine and her family's strict beliefs created wounds that would stay with her for life. At school, she was different. Teachers and classmates saw her talent. Her drama teacher, Anna Engelman, encouraged her. Friends started calling her Viv, a name that sounded lighter and freer, not chained to the heavy rules of her family. She joined cheerleading, beauty contests, and even went to school with William Inge, who would later become a famous playwright. But at home, nothing changed. Her family still didn't accept her love for acting. By her teenage years, Vivian was sneaking out at night, not to get into trouble, but to chase a piece of freedom. She wanted to sing, to dance, to perform on stage. Her family kept trying to break her spirit, but she refused to let go of her dream. Finally, she took control of her own identity. She dropped her family name, Jones, and became Vivian Vance. She chose the last name from Vance Randolph, a man who collected folk stories. Maybe she felt connected to those old tales, wild, untamed, and free, just like the life she wanted. Changing her name was more than just a stage decision. It was her way of cutting ties with the world that had tried to hold her down. From then on, she wasn't her mother's daughter. She belonged to herself. In 1930, when she was just 21, Vivian started performing at the Albuquerque Little Theater. She took on all kinds of roles, from seductive women to gentle nuns, and her talent was so strong that people began calling the theater the Vivian Vance Playhouse. The community believed in her so much that they raised money to send her to New York so she could study acting. That moment showed her that sometimes strangers can believe in you more than family ever will. With only $50 in her pocket and a suitcase of dreams, she boarded a train to New York. Life in the city was hard. She worked as a waitress by day and auditioned by night. Rejections came one after another, and sometimes she skipped meals just to save subway fare. But Vivian had the kind of determination that didn't break easily. By 1932, she landed a chorus role in the Broadway musical Music in the Air. It wasn't a starring role, but it was the start she had been fighting for. Slowly, people noticed her natural comedic timing, her energy, and her ability to shine on stage. Vivian's career grew in the late 1930s and early 1940s. She replaced performers at the last minute, sometimes saving entire productions. In 1941, she landed her biggest role yet in the musical Let's Face It alongside Danny Kaye and Eve Arden. The show ran for 547 performances, a massive success. Vivian had finally proven herself as a Broadway star. But as her career was rising, her personal life was falling apart. She married Joseph Dannneck Jr. at just 19, hoping marriage would free her from her strict family. It didn't. He left after 3 years. In 1941, she married actor Philip Ober, but this marriage was far worse. Ober couldn't handle his wife's success. He became violent and abusive, tearing her down whenever he could. Even Lucille Ball, years before they worked together, noticed and called out the abuse. But Vivian was stuck in the cycle, hiding bruises and trying to keep up appearances while her heart broke inside. In 1945, while touring with the play The Voice of the Turtle, Vivian broke down. She later admitted, "I cracked up." Years of pressure, heartbreak, and hidden pain caught up with her. She entered therapy, something few people talked about in those days, and began to piece herself back together. That experience changed her. She began visiting psychiatric hospitals, not as a celebrity but as someone who understood pain. She told patients they weren't alone, because she had been there too. This compassion became a part of her, even while she continued chasing her acting dreams. She starred in more plays, toured the world, and even went to Africa during World War II to perform for soldiers. But despite her hard work, Hollywood didn't embrace her right away. She appeared in only 2 films, The Secret Fury in 1950 and The Blue Veil in 1951. She turned down flashy roles that could have made her a star because she wanted respect more than fame. Those missed chances haunted her, but she kept moving forward. Then came the turning point of her life. In 1951, Vivian was cast as Ethel Mertz in I Love Lucy. At first, Lucille Ball wasn't happy with the decision. Vivian was close in age, had the same hair color, and was too attractive in Lucy's eyes. So, the producers dressed Vivian in frumpy clothes and styled her to look older and less glamorous. They wanted Ethel to be plain so Lucy could shine. This was the beginning of a struggle Vivian would face for the rest of her career, being typecast as the sidekick, the second best, the funny friend. And then came the cruel rumor about her supposed contract to gain weight. In truth, Vivian's weight changed naturally, and she often tried to diet. But Lucy once joked about a contract at a party, and people believed it for decades. Vivian had to carry that false story everywhere she went. On screen, she created magic with Lucille Ball. Their friendship and comic timing were unmatched. But off-screen, things weren't always smooth. At times, they clashed, but they also shared moments of real laughter and support. The chemistry that audiences loved was born from both conflict and connection. The real nightmare, though, was her relationship with her on-screen husband, William Frawley. The two hated each other from the start. Vivian once joked that Frawley looked like her grandfather, and he overheard. From then on, their feud never stopped. He mocked her voice, insulted her looks, and drank heavily on set. They avoided each other whenever possible, and when he died in 1966, Vivian didn't mourn. Instead, she raised a glass of champagne. That single act showed just how deep their hatred ran. Despite all this, Vivian made history. In 1954, she became the first woman ever to win an Emmy for Outstanding Supporting Actress. It was proof that side characters were just as important as the stars. She was nominated 3 more times, but even the award couldn't free her from being trapped as Ethel. She once had the looks and talent to be a glamorous Broadway star, but now the world only saw her as the frumpy sidekick. Money, at least, improved. She started with $280 a week, but by season 6, she was earning $7,500 per episode thanks to a strong agent who fought for her. At a time when women rarely asked for more, Vivian proved she knew her worth. Still, behind the laughter and success, Vivian was hurting. She longed for roles that would let her sing, dance, and show her true talent. In one episode, Ethel's birthday, she finally got to sing on the show. Her voice was powerful, trained, and graceful. Fans loved it, but William Frawley mocked her relentlessly. fame also brought fear. She received thousands of letters, some kind and some disturbing. People followed her in public, crossing boundaries, and she had to hire security to feel safe. The same fame that gave her a career also robbed her of peace. Vivian Vance had reached the top of television, but deep down, she felt trapped in a role she could never escape. As I Love Lucy grew into a phenomenon, Vivian Vance found herself caught in a strange trap. On one hand, she was part of television history. Millions of viewers adored her as Ethel Mertz, the loyal, funny best friend who got pulled into Lucy's wild schemes. On the other hand, the role came at a personal cost. She was boxed into frumpy clothes, unflattering makeup, and storylines that made her look older than she was. While audiences laughed at Ethel's adventures, Vivian secretly longed to break free from the role that had made her famous. Fame had given her stability, but it also locked her into an image she didn't want. This inner conflict began to eat at her as the years went on. The relationship between Vivian and Lucille Ball was complex. On screen, their timing was flawless. Lucy and Ethel became one of the most iconic duos in television history. They bickered, plotted, and got into trouble together, and viewers couldn't get enough. Off-screen, however, the story was different. At first, Lucy worried that Vivian was too attractive and might upstage her. That's why the producers worked hard to dull Vivian's looks. They gave her plain dresses, dowdy hair, and scripts that emphasized her as the ordinary one. For years, Vivian quietly accepted this, even though it hurt. But with time, something else happened. Lucille Ball came to respect Vivian's talent. She realized her show wouldn't be the same without her. Their relationship was sometimes rocky, but beneath the tension, there was a bond that neither of them could deny. They were co-stars, rivals, and friends all at once. But if Lucy was complicated, William Frawley was simply unbearable. Playing her husband Fred Mertz, Frawley made life on set difficult. Their dislike of each other became legendary. When Vivian once remarked that he was old enough to be her grandfather, Frawley never forgave her. He mocked her weight, insulted her talent, and often drank before filming. Their mutual hatred was so strong that CBS once considered giving them their own spin-off, but Vivian refused. She told producers she'd never work with him again, not even for all the money in the world. That decision ended any chance of her having her own sitcom, but she stood by it. Years later, when Frawley died, Vivian famously toasted his passing with champagne. It wasn't cruelty, it was relief. She had endured years of torment from him, and now that chapter was closed. Still, Vivian couldn't deny the opportunities that I Love Lucy gave her. She made history when she won the Emmy for Outstanding Supporting Actress in 1954. It was the first time any woman had received that honor, and it cemented her place in television history. Yet, even with that recognition, she felt trapped. To the public, she would always be Ethel. The glamorous Broadway actress she once dreamed of being seemed to disappear behind the apron and wisecracks. At first, Vivian thought that once I Love Lucy ended, she'd be able to move into new roles. But Hollywood had a way of keeping people in boxes. Casting directors only saw her as the funny sidekick, never the star. When I Love Lucy wrapped up in 1957, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz created the Lucy-Desi Comedy Hour. Vivian was brought back to play Ethel again. While it gave her steady work, it also reminded her that she couldn't escape the shadow of her most famous role. Her personal life continued to be just as turbulent. She divorced Philip Ober after years of abuse and pain. By then, she had reached a breaking point. She needed a new beginning. She eventually remarried, this time to John Dodds, a publisher who treated her with kindness and respect. It was a step toward healing, though the scars of her earlier marriages never fully faded. Vivian's health, meanwhile, became a constant struggle. Years of stress, smoking, and emotional battles wore her down. She often suffered from depression, something few people in Hollywood openly discussed at the time. In the 1960s, when Lucy launched a new sitcom, The Lucy Show, she invited Vivian back. Once again, audiences were thrilled to see Lucy and Ethel reunited. But behind the laughter, Vivian's body was failing her. She suffered from nervous breakdowns and physical illnesses that forced her to step away more than once. Her appearances became less frequent, and eventually, she left the show altogether. Despite her health problems, Vivian remained committed to her craft. She continued acting in theater, appearing in plays like Barefoot in the Park. She also made guest appearances on shows like The Great Houdini and The Lucy Show. But Hollywood still couldn't see her as anything but Ethel. This typecasting haunted her, and she often spoke about how painful it was to be stuck in one role forever. She wanted to show the world that she was more than the frumpy neighbor in Lucy's shadow. She wanted people to see her as the talented singer, dancer, and actress she had trained to be. Yet, every time she stepped in front of a camera, people only wanted Ethel. The rumor about her contract to stay overweight never went away, either. Tabloids repeated it, fans whispered it, and people assumed it was true. Vivian, who had always struggled with her body image, felt crushed by this lie. She wanted to scream the truth, that she had never signed such a contract, that it was all a cruel misunderstanding, but the story was too powerful to stop. Even today, many people still believe it. For Vivian, it was a reminder of how easily women in Hollywood could be judged, ridiculed, and misunderstood. While Vivian's professional life brought her both fame and frustration, her personal life slowly began to improve. With John Dodds by her side, she found some peace. They settled in Connecticut, away from the constant noise of Hollywood. There, she enjoyed gardening, painting, and living a quieter life. She became a strong advocate for mental health, often visiting hospitals to speak with patients and encourage them. She understood pain, and she wanted others to know they weren't alone. This side of her, the compassionate, giving side, was something the world rarely saw. On television, she was the wisecracking sidekick. In real life, she was a survivor who carried her own scars while helping others heal theirs. But her health continued to decline. In the 1970s, Vivian was diagnosed with breast cancer. At first, she kept it private, determined not to let the world see her suffering. She underwent treatment, fought bravely, and even returned to acting when she could. She appeared in a few television specials, including reunions with Lucille Ball. The sight of Lucy and Ethel together again brought joy to millions, even as Vivian herself was quietly battling for her life. She smiled, performed, and entertained, but behind the scenes, the disease was taking its toll. Vivian's resilience was remarkable. She had endured an abusive childhood, toxic marriages, grueling typecasting, and now a devastating illness. Yet, through it all, she never gave up on bringing joy to others. She often said that laughter was healing, and maybe that's why she never stopped trying to make people laugh, even when her own life was filled with pain. In her final years, she reflected on her career with a mix of pride and sorrow. She was proud of what she had achieved, proud of being part of I Love Lucy, and proud of the love fans had shown her. But she also felt sadness that she had never been able to fully escape Ethel, that the world never truly saw the full range of her talent. By the late 1970s, her health had worsened. She moved to California with her husband to be closer to her doctors. Friends came to visit, and she spent her last months surrounded by love. Despite everything she had been through, Vivian never lost her sense of humor. She cracked jokes, laughed with her visitors, and faced the end with remarkable grace. The woman who had once been forced into plain clothes and frumpy hairstyles by producers was, at her core, still the vibrant, talented, beautiful actress who had dreamed of Broadway as a girl in Kansas. She never stopped being that person, even if Hollywood didn't always let her show eye. By the end of the 1970s, Vivian Vance's health had declined so much that she could no longer keep up the public face she had worn for decades. Years of battling depression, the stress of her career, and now the relentless spread of breast cancer had weakened her body. Still, she remained determined to live with dignity. She and her husband John Dodds moved to Belvedere, California, a quiet place near San Francisco, so she could rest away from the spotlight. Friends described her as fragile but still full of humor. Even in her weakest moments, Vivian could make people laugh. She joked with her nurses, teased her husband gently, and always found a way to lighten the heaviness around her. To those who visited, it was clear she was tired, but she was not broken. She had lived through too much to be defeated by illness without a fight. Her legacy speaks louder than any rumor or role ever could. She was strong, she was resilient, and she was unforgettable. And though the world knew her as Ethel Mertz, her true story, the story of Vivian Vance, is even more powerful than the laughter she left behind. During this time, one of the most important visits she received was from Lucille Ball. Despite their complicated history, jealousy, competition, and the pressures of working side by side for years, the bond between Lucy and Vivian was undeniable. They had created magic together that no one else could ever replicate. In their last meeting, Lucy came to see Vivian in California, knowing the end was near. The two women sat together, reminiscing about the old days. They laughed about the candy factory, the grape stomping scene, and the times when they couldn't keep a straight face during filming. They also cried, because they both knew this would likely be their final goodbye. When Lucy left Vivian's home that day, she was in tears. She later said that saying goodbye to Vivian was one of the hardest moments of her life. They were not just co-stars. They were partners in comedy, women who had carried each other through the pressures of fame, and ultimately, friends who had shared something no one else could understand. On August 17, 1979, Vivian Vance passed away at the age of 70. She died peacefully at home, with her husband by her side. News of her death spread quickly, and fans across the country mourned. To many, she wasn't just Ethel Mertz, she was family. She was the woman who had made them laugh after long days, who had reminded them that friendship could survive anything, and who had shown that comedy wasn't just about the star, but about the people who supported them. Her death was a reminder of how deeply she had touched audiences, even if Hollywood had never fully given her the credit she deserved. For Lucille Ball, the loss was devastating. She later admitted that she felt as if she had lost part of herself. Without Vivian, the world of I Love Lucy no longer felt complete. Lucy would go on to live another decade, but she always carried Vivian with her. She often spoke of her with love and respect, finally acknowledging publicly what she had always known privately, that Vivian Vance was irreplaceable. Fans, too, began to look back with fresh eyes, realizing that while Lucy may have been the star, I Love Lucy would never have been the same without Ethel. Vivian had been the perfect counterbalance, the friend who made the comedy believable, and the partner who gave Lucy the space to shine. Over the years, Vivian's legacy has grown stronger. Younger generations continue to discover I Love Lucy through reruns, DVDs, and streaming platforms. For many, the magic of the show still feels fresh, even though it first aired more than 70 years ago. And with each laugh, Vivian Vance's memory lives on. What makes her story so powerful is not just the comedy she gave to the world, but the struggles she overcame behind the scenes. She was a woman who battled strict parents, abusive marriages, cruel rumors, and serious illness. She was typecast, misunderstood, and sometimes overshadowed. Yet through it all, she left behind something timeless: joy. Vivian's life is also a story of resilience. She proved that success doesn't always come from being the star in the spotlight. Sometimes, it comes from being the person who supports others, who makes the story whole. Without Ethel, Lucy's adventures would have fallen flat. It was Vivian's perfect reactions, her timing, her ability to be both funny and relatable, that made the show feel real. She taught audiences that sidekicks are not less important, they are essential. And in her own way, she broke barriers. Winning the Emmy in 1954 wasn't just a personal victory, it was a milestone for women in television, showing that supporting roles mattered just as much as leading ones. Her story also carries an important message about the cost of fame. Behind the laughs, Vivian endured pain that few people saw. She faced rumors about her weight, criticism about her looks, and constant pressure to stay in a role that didn't reflect who she truly was. Yet she never let bitterness consume her. Instead, she used her struggles to connect with others, visiting psychiatric hospitals, supporting mental health causes, and reminding people that they weren't alone. That compassion was as much a part of her legacy as her comedy. Today, when people watch I Love Lucy, they often laugh at Lucy's antics, the chocolate factory, the grape stomping, the countless disguises. But look closer, and you'll see Vivian Vance right there, grounding the chaos, making it all believable. She wasn't just playing a character, she was shaping television history. Her humor, her warmth, and her presence made millions of people feel like they knew her. For some, Ethel Mertz was more than a character, she was a friend who came into their living rooms every week and stayed for a lifetime. Vivian's truth, the one often hidden behind gossip and rumor, is that she was far more than the frumpy sidekick people thought she was. She was a talented actress, a gifted singer, a survivor of deep personal struggles, and a woman who gave everything she had to her craft. She may not have received the starring roles she once dreamed of, but in the end, she achieved something even greater, immortality. As long as people keep laughing at I Love Lucy, Vivian Vance will never be forgotten. Her life reminds us of something important: behind every great star, there are people who make the magic possible. Vivian Vance was one of those people. She carried her pain quietly, but she poured her joy into her work. She may not have always been seen for who she truly was, but when people think about classic television, one show almost always comes to mind: I Love Lucy. It wasn't just a sitcom, it was a cultural phenomenon. From the moment it first aired in 1951, it changed television forever. It was the first show to be filmed in front of a live studio audience using multiple cameras, a system still used in sitcoms today. It was one of the first shows to portray a mixed marriage on screen, with Lucille Ball starring alongside her real-life Cuban husband, Desi Arnaz. It was also one of the first TV programs to be broadcast nationwide, bringing the same laughs to small towns and big cities alike. For decades, reruns of I Love Lucy have aired around the world, reaching new generations who fall in love with its timeless comedy. Most people remember the red-haired, high-energy antics of Lucille Ball. She was the star, the genius who could make any situation hilarious, whether stuffing chocolates into her mouth, stomping grapes in Italy, or pretending to be part of a musical act. Lucy was unstoppable. But while she grabbed the spotlight, someone else was right there beside her, making all that comedy work: Vivian Vance, who played Ethel Mertz. Ethel wasn't glamorous. She wasn't meant to be the center of attention. She was Lucy's sidekick, her best friend, the person who always got dragged into wild schemes but managed to make the chaos feel real. Without Ethel, Lucy's crazy adventures wouldn't have landed the same way. Vivian Vance gave the show its heart, its grounding, and some of its funniest moments. But while audiences loved Ethel, the real story of Vivian Vance was far more complicated. For decades, rumors surrounded her. People whispered that she had signed a humiliating contract to gain weight just so Lucille Ball could look thinner. Others repeated gossip about bitter feuds with her co-stars, especially William Frawley, who played her on-screen husband Fred Mertz. There were whispers of black eyes, of backstage cruelty, and of deep unhappiness hidden behind her smile. Some of these stories were exaggerated. Others were completely false. But some contained painful truths that only came to light much later. Vivian Vance's journey wasn't just about television stardom. It was about survival. She grew up in a strict home where her love of performing was treated as a sin. She faced abusive marriages that left her physically and emotionally scarred. She endured breakdowns, battled mental health struggles, and spent years feeling trapped in a role that both made her famous and limited her career. And yet, through it all, she brought laughter to millions. When she stepped onto the set of I Love Lucy in 1951, she had already built a strong career on Broadway. She wasn't a nobody. She was a seasoned actress with a beautiful singing voice and the kind of comic timing that can't be taught. But television has a way of defining people by a single role, and for Vivian, that role was Ethel Mertz. While Lucy became a global icon, Vivian often felt stuck in the shadow of her success. She won the very first Emmy Award ever given for supporting actress in 1954, historic achievement, but even that recognition couldn't free her from the image of Ethel. Behind the laughter, her life was filled with struggles that most people never saw. She fought hard for fair pay at a time when women rarely did. She clashed with William Frawley, whose alcoholism and bitterness made their working relationship nearly unbearable. She suffered the heartbreak of infertility, the pain of abusive marriages, and later, the devastating toll of cancer. And yet, her story is not only one of pain, it is also one of resilience, talent, and quiet strength. Vivian Vance helped shape one of the greatest shows in television history, and in doing so, she carved out a place for herself in entertainment history. She may not have been the star, but she was the glue that held it all together. This is the truth about Vivian Vance. The truth about the woman behind Ethel Mertz. The truth about the laughter, the heartbreak, the lies, and the legacy she left behind. If you think you know the story of I Love Lucy, buckle up, because Vivian's side of the story is even more dramatic than the sitcom itself.